My parents have attended the same church for almost 4 decades, which means the church they attend today was the same church I grew up in, the same church they dragged me to against my will week after week growing up as a child. And even as a child, even though I didn't like church, I was still a church nerd. I don't know how that worked. I was pretty sure I can do it better. But I noticed something that happened in my parents' small church because, in its glory days, it had like 100 people going to it. It was always a very small church. But what would happen is the church would get a new pastor and the church would charge off in one direction, doing one thing, pursuing one set of values. And then 5-6 years later, that pastor would leave and then find another pastor, and then the church would charge off in another direction, and he would be there 5 or 6 years, and he would leave. The church would find another pastor, and they would charge off in another direction. And what I noticed, especially now looking back at their church they still attend, that over the years, over the decades, the church kind of zigzagged its way into obscurity. It zigzagged its way into irrelevance in their community where the church is smaller, the impact is minimal, and as a result of all these shifting visions and ideas and leadership, the church just never got traction over the decades. And then being in a place where I'm a pastor at a church that is still on the ground floor and we're building for the next 40 plus years of ministry, and in 40 years from now, I do not plan on being the pastor at this church, just for the record. I know, trust me, your great-grandchildren will thank me. I thought, I don't want to create that kind of culture, and I don't want to create that kind of church, and the elders at Hope don't want to create that kind of church where, okay, we're going this way now, and then, 5 years we're going to go that way, because you'll never get traction that way. So a few years ago, after I'd been on staff for 3 years, we decided to figure out, well, what exactly are our values as an organization, as a local church? Because I believe that you cannot impose values and be artificial with them. I think you have to unearth them and figure out collectively as a group this process to try and unearth what we value. And we finally figured it out. I preached a series on it 4 summers ago. And if you go to First Group, if you're ready to take a step at Hope, that's where we ask you to go. Go to First Group. You learn about the values of Hope that make us what we are. You figure out if we're the right church for you. You figure out how to leverage our church for your faith in God to grow. But the first value that we unearthed and discovered, and it's still very true today, is that we value Jesus and His gospel. Now, gospel is good news about what Jesus did for you in history. Namely, the message of Jesus, and therefore the message of Christianity, is not, here's good rules for you to keep to be a good person. Keep these rules, you'll be a good person, God will accept you. It's not good rules, it's good news. Good news about that Jesus gives you the perfection we lack. He gives you access to God. He gives you God's acceptance, God's mercy, God's presence in your life. All this is a gift Jesus brings. This one profound truth of gospel, of good news of what Christ has done, has incredible implications for our lives. It impacts anything. There is no area of your life that is not affected by this reality. In fact, the reason why is because all I do week after week is I unpack this good news and I talk about one of the implications for our lives on earth or our lives in eternity. That's all I do every week. It's really an easy job. I'm just the mailman. Here's the mail, here you go. And I just work 1 day a week. So highly recommend it, kids, if you're looking for a career choice. Just think about it. So what we're doing in this series, Faith, what would happen if we took this good news and we really let it saturate the deepest levels of our hearts, the deepest levels of our minds, the deepest levels of our souls? How would that impact the way that we approach relationships? How would that impact the way that we approach money? How would that impact, as we saw last week, the way we use our words? That book of the Bible is called James. He was the little brother of Jesus. And he watched Jesus grow up, so he knew what this looked like firsthand. What would it look like if, as a people, we genuinely believed that God loves you so much that Christ died for your sins to pay your debt of sin to God so that you could live with Him forever? What would it look like if we deeply believed that? Now, I know last week's sermon generated a lot of conversations. Those of you who are in small groups at Hope, I got so much feedback about how powerful the message was last week, talking about words, because James, I'll have to go online and listen to that. The sermon was average, but the verses from James were amazing, just so helpful for our lives. Today, we get to a new topic of who He says He is, and He will do everything He's promised to do. what are the implications in the community? In your family, in the church, in the world around us? Now, I don't know if there's a more timely topic to talk about than community as we look at the state of our country today and how fractured we are as a nation. I don't know if we've ever been more scattered, more fragmented, more at odds, more polarized over so many different issues that are destroying community in America. Again, racism is on the news every single night. We're talking about political dissension, ideological dissension, different groups, people hating other people. There is a lack of community across the board in our nation. So people think, well, good, I'm going to go to church because the reality is that's probably not your experience if you have a church background. You went to the place that was supposed to value community, and what you found was there are a lot of hypocrites, a lot of people being judgmental, and you were not welcomed into that community. In fact, you felt ostracized from that community. Or what about the implications for home? If you think about your immediate family or your extended family, is there dissension in your family? Well, James is going to speak to all of that today as he talks about how to take the gospel and apply it to our relationships and be a people who create community in the church, in the home, and in society around us. So I think this is just super helpful today. We're picking it up where we left off last week. We're in the middle of James chapter 3, and he asks this question: who is wise and understanding among you? So show of hands, who's wise and understanding? No one's going to raise their hand on this one like, either it's a trap or I'm a jerk if I raise my hand. But the reality is, you still think you're wise and understanding because you've thought to yourself, if my husband would just listen to me, if my kids would just do what I said, if my boss would listen to my ideas and see what I see, we all think that we're wise and understanding. So James is talking to you. He says, who's wise and understanding among you? Let them exhibit wisdom by saying it. You exhibit wisdom by showing it, by their good life, by deeds. James says, if you're wise and understanding, and you think you are, the way you prove that is not by talking, but by doing deeds, by producing fruit, by living a good life, and those deeds have to grow out of humility. Now, as James is writing this, who would he be thinking about as the role model for what true wisdom looks like? He would be thinking about Jesus. Jesus' teaching is amazing. He demonstrated it through his works of service, through his good life, by deeds that come from humility. Jesus is always busy, but someone comes up to him, Jesus, I need some help. He's got nothing but time for that person. Yeah, I can help you. What's your problem? How can I help you? How can I serve you today? You're sick, you're hungry, you've got a problem. I will help you because he was wise. You have a sin problem? I will die for you on the cross. Jesus is wise. He's thinking of, so if you want to know what a truly wise life looks like, James wants you to look and think about the life of Jesus. That's true wisdom. He continues. But, as in, this is the opposite of wisdom, so if you see these things in your life, you are not a wise person. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. So the first thing he talks about that is foolish and it destroys community is bitter envy. Now, envy is that feeling, that emotion of bitterness you feel, and when I say you, I don't mean you, I mean other people. I know you wouldn't do this. It's that emotion that you feel against someone else, that bitterness you have against someone else because that person has what you don't have and perhaps can never have. That person has a quality, a characteristic, an attribute, a possession, a relationship that you wish you could have, but you can't have it. So you resent them. You become embittered against them. I wish I could fit into those genes. I wish my kids could be in that school. I wish I could have that job. I wish I was born into that family instead of my jacked up family. I wish I had those opportunities in life. I wish I were born with that IQ. Envy is when you feel animosity, feel bitter, feel resentment towards someone else who has what you wish you could have. Now, envy does not make any sense whatsoever once you think about it. Because if you are bitter towards someone who has what you want, what can they do to solve your problem? They can't solve your problem. And if they can't solve your problem, that means they are not your real problem. I mean, the closest thing they can do to solving your problem is to fail. Okay? Here's how envy feels better. What else can do to make you feel better if you have envy is to fail, is to lose what they have. Didn't happen in my home. Hypothetically speaking, since I'm a benevolent dad, I say to my kids after dinner, kids, in my benevolent bag of licorice, here you go, son. So you're a benevolent dad. I know. And to the second one, I heap up a mound of ice cream and I douse. Here you go. Aren't I a benevolent father? You are a benevolent father. And to my third, my youngest, I present a carrot. Now, the youngest one will not become bitter against the older two because they got licorice and ice cream. Against whom will his frustration be directed? Me. And do you know why it'll be directed against me? Because he's 7 and he has life figured out. The dad giveth and the dad taketh away. He understands how this works. So if he thinks that is not fair, that he got a carrot, his frustration would be poured out on me, not on his brothers, because dad gives the gift. If you are a Christian and someone has a quality or characteristic or attribute or opportunity or good fortune that you do not have, who gave them that? God did, yet you haven't figured out what my 7-year-old has figured out. They're not your problem. You are mad at them because of what God decided to give them and not give to you. Now, if you are a spiritual person but not a Christian, you just go with whatever higher power you believe in. Whatever higher power you go along with, that higher power decided that they would have what you want and you would not have it. And if you're an atheist and someone just dragged you to church today saying, hey, there's some cute girls, maybe you'll meet a cute girl, and you're like, all right, I guess you're just mad at the universe because the universe ripped you off and the universe isn't fair. But anytime you feel envy, okay, and this, again, it doesn't make any sense what you think about it, here's what you are doing. Here's our first fill in the blank. Envy is this: God owes me, so I hate you. Owes me those looks, owes me that body, owes me those opportunities, owes me those kids, owes me whatever it is, and because God owes me, I'm going to hate you. Now, it doesn't make any sense, but that's what envy is, and envy destroys community in the home, in the church, in society. So he says, if you're harboring this in your heart, do not think you're wise. If you are resentful against anybody for what they have, you are not wise. That's not God's wisdom. In fact, look at what he says next. He says, such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. I'm going to get back to that in a second. You say, that's a little bit of hyperbole, because I know preachers every once in a while exaggerate. This is not hyperbole. I'm going to show you that in a minute. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, notice that twice now he's connected these together. They're inextricably linked to one another. There you find disorder and every evil practice. So he says, where you have envy, there you also have selfish ambition. Now let me talk about that. Selfish ambition is this idea that I have, and it comes from my own heart, and it's this idea that you have, and it comes from your own heart, that I am the center of the universe. I am the sun that everything revolves around. That's how I want it in my heart. That's how I want life to be. I want to be the sun. Isn't that how you want life to be? You want everything to revolve around you? See, when I get home, what I want in my heart is for home to be all about me. Okay, I want to walk in the door and Kathy says, oh, Jason, I'm sure you had a really hard day at work. Here, I got some steak for you to grill, and the kids are gone. I didn't get rid of them completely because I know you like to play with them once in a while, but they're gone for the night. It's just you and me and steak, and what do you want to do? You want to watch a game? You want to go see a movie? It's all about you. That's what I want when I go home. When I go to work, I want it to be all about me. Don't you want it to be all about you at work? And when I'm driving to work, I want the traffic to get out of my way because it's all about me, and you shouldn't be driving in that lane. Don't you know I want to drive there? Isn't that what we want deep in our hearts? James says that is selfish ambition. And wherever you have the attitude or belief on any level that it's all about me, somebody is going to have something that proves it isn't about you because they have what you want, and you will be bitter as a result, and envy will spring up. And he says that is not from heaven. No awareness and no care, nothing but apathy for what your life will look like 10 billion years from now. It is only concerned about today and instant gratification. And our entire Western culture is pushing you to earthly wisdom. It's about me, it's about my deal, it's about what I want. He says it's unspiritual. It's unspiritual because that is not from God, it is not about God, and then he calls it demonic. Why would he call it demonic? Life isn't about you. God is. You are not the sun that God revolves around. God is for God. God is for His glory. God is for His name. It's for God. And if God were about you and your glory, because He worships you, and you are not God, and you are not the point of everything, it all revolves around Him. Now again, selfish ambition and this envy which destroys community, he's thinking of Jesus to His own apostles. One time Jesus gathered His apostles together in Mark chapter 8, and He said, hey guys, here's what you need to know. I know that I have a lot of momentum and a lot of popularity and a lot of crowds, and there's a lot of sermons and a lot of miracles, and it's all cool and it's all awesome, but here's what you need to know. I need you to know where all this is going. Judas, not saying, just saying, I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be tried, I'm going to be beaten, and I'm going to be crucified, and on the third. Don't you know how good this is for us? I mean, you're the man, but we're like the right-hand man to the uneducated fisherman, but now I'm somebody. Jesus, don't go negative. Don't talk about dying and all that stuff. Let's keep this going. And here's what Jesus said to Peter in Mark. Behind me, who? Get behind me, Satan. Jesus said, Peter, here's the deal. When you aren't concerned about my concerns and you're only concerned about your deal and your kingdom and what's in it for you, and you want to be the son, you're like Satan. That's demonic. That's evil. That is godless. That is the opposite of who I am. So here's your next fill in the blank. To prioritize my concerns over God's concerns is demonic. It's just ungodly. It's the opposite of God. Now, the fact that God is for God and the fact that God is for God's glory, explain why. People who think they are the sun around which everything is to revolve are miserable people. You know people like this, don't you? Because when you walk into home and you expect everybody to be all about you, those expectations are not going to be met, and you're going to be angry and you're going to be miserable, and you're going to go to work and you're going to expect everything to be all about you, but they are not all about you, so you are angry and you are miserable, and you show up at church or you're driving down the road and it's not meeting your expectations. People who are filled with selfish ambition are miserable people when they think it's supposed to be all about them, because life is never all about you, but we keep thinking that. Expectations on people around you, so you're disappointed and crushed by them or infuriated by them. It means I can walk into my home and I can say, my home is about God's glory. So how can I love and serve my wife and my children today? And I can walk into the church office and they can all I've got some great new glory. And I can drive down the road and be in, but it's not about me anymore. So it's not personal. I don't take it personally, because it does. But to begin to see that everything is about God, and because you are a God of peace, and this will bring you glory. And